Hello and welcome to this wonderful place that we call Grazing Brains. Please subscribe. Optimization of a neutron imaging system using the modulation trans function. Paper written by Grigorova et al. And published as an open source paper in Nuclear Instrumentation and Methods in Physics Research A. Introduction. Neutron imaging is a non-destructive technique that uses neutrons to probe an object and evaluate its physical properties and internal structures. Neutron images are obtained by exposing an object to a uniform neutron beam and determining the transmitted density after conversion into visible light using a detector. This technique has existed since 1946-48, when two independent studies used neutrons to generate radiographs. In the late 1960s, reactor facilities started to offer neutron radiography for commercial use. 30 years later, the first high-resolution neutron tomography study was carried out. This method is now commonly used in earth science, archaeology, paleontology, the metal industry, and agriculture to determine the internal structure of materials opaque to visible light. DINGO, the thermoneutron imaging instrument in the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organization (UNST), is situated closely to the core of the opal reactor and benefits from collimated high-flux thermoneutrons. Depending on the choice of collimator, the instrument can deliver either 1.5 times 10⁷ neutron per second per centimeter cubic to the sample position of an LD of 1000, known as a high-resolution mode, or 4.75 times 10⁷ neutron per second centimeter cubic for an LD of 500, known as high flux mode, where L is the pinhole to sample distance and D is the pinhole diameter. Samples are held on a rotary table that allows automated collection of multiple images over a range of sample rotations. Neutrons are converted to visible light using a phosphor, which is then demagnified into a scientific SCMOS detector for image capture. The modulation transfer function, or MTF, measures the ability of an optical system to transfer information from an object to an image. This can be used to quantitatively determine any deterioration of an image due to the optical components. If the system is perfect, all of the contrast and physical details will be transferred to the image. In this case, all the frequency information will be passed equally and the MTF of the system will be 1 or 100%. When half of the information is passed, the MTF is 0.5, and in the case where no information is transferred to the image, the MTF is 0. The MTF is one of the best tools available to quantify the overall system imaging performance, since it incorporates both spatial resolution and contrast. The MTF can be evaluated in 1D, 2D, and 3D. The spatial resolution of an image is the smallest distance between 2 points or objects in an image that can be distinguished from each other. Normally, the spatial resolution is determined at the minimum of 10% contrast, below which the 2 points are indistinguishable. In this work, we use 10% contrast to calculate the MTF of the system. We performed a number of MTF measurements to determine which component of the UNST's thermoneutron imaging instrument, DINGO, had the most significant influence on the image quality. A standard PSI Siemens star is often used to determine the MTF, and thus resolution of the system as a function of contrast. The resolution of the DINGO imaging system was found to be too low to calculate the MTF with a standard Siemens star due to the large demagnification. We developed a new measurement method that uses a phantom comprising a series of holes cut in a neutron-absorbent material. We measure the influence of the beam mode, scintillator screen composition, and thickness, detector, lenses, and the exposure time on radiograph resolution. Image generation and MTF. The Siemens star and the phantom were placed adjacent to one another in the neutron beam. To maintain consistency in our experiment setup, we took precaution to ensure that objects were kept as parallel to the scintillator screen as possible and at 4 mm distance. The position of the objective lenses were varied to qualitatively optimize focus using the Siemens stars for reference. For each parameter tested, open and closed beam images were captured and used for normalization. Siemens star. A Siemens star is a commonly used mask used for determining the spatial resolution limits in all directions of optical instrument. It consists of 128 spokes and 5 concentric radial circles. The spacing between the spokes is 500 micron, equivalent to 2 cycles per millimeter, and their inner ring with a spacing of 400 micron or 25 cycles per millimeter. The resolution was calculated close to the concentric radial markers in the object. The individual spokes become in resolve between the 4th and the 5th radial markers. The flowchart containing in Figure 3 summarizes the methodology used to calculate the MTF values from the Siemens star image. More detailed information about this process can be found in Reference 20, in which the authors use the Levenberg-Marquardt algorithm to fit to the data. Phantom. Phantoms are typically used in computer tomography, CT, to measure the image MTF. We created a phantom that can be used to calculate the MTF of low-resolution neutron imaging system. The phantom comprises of a 35 micron thick cadmium sheet sandwiched between 2 aluminum plates, each 2.5 mm thick. 5 circular holes were cut in the cadmium sheet. Circular shapes are symmetric in all directions so that the MTF can be estimated in any direction and a mechanical alignment is unnecessary. To determine the MTF and the spatial frequency with the phantom, we use the wire method described in Reference 20. Figure 4 shows the main step made during the MTF calculation. PSI Siemens star versus phantom. Figure 5 shows the MTF results calculated using the Siemens star and the phantom described in this paper. Resolution is usually measured at MTF of 10% from a plot such as Figure 5. This means that the MTF must be measured to a value of 1 in order that we can determine where 10% is. The Siemens star did not provide MTF values that leveled out to a value of 1, meaning that it cannot be used to determine the MTF or the resolution of this system. In Figure 5, we have scaled the MTF values calculated from the Siemens star to match the MTF calculated from the phantom for illustrative purposes. We can see that they match quite well, suggesting that the methodology used to converting the MTF is correct in both cases. The spatial resolution calculated at 10% MTF using the phantom was found to be 40.36 micron per cycle. The limit on the lower resolution data measured with the Siemens star is the reason we had to develop an alternative method using the phantom. All subsequent MTF measurements present in this work were made using the phantom. Optical system components. Different components of the Dingell's imaging system were varied to determine the contribution of each component to the overall imaging resolution. The error is calculated using the estimated standard deviation. Detectors. The biggest influence on the spatial resolution of an image is the detector pixel size. The Iris 15 SCMOS detector with field of view of 20.149 by 12.61 mm and pixel size of 4.25 by 4.25 micron has an effective pixel size of 27 micron per pixel when the 50 mm lens is used, and 9 micron per pixel when the 100 mm lens is used, 9 micron per pixel with the 100 mm lens. It produces a spatial resolution in the image plane of around 40.40 micron per cycle, independent of the lens, with a signal-to-noise ratio of 290. The alternative detector available for use on Dingo Andor Marina SCMOS detector with field of view of 22.5 by 22.5 mm and pixel size of 11 by 11 micron has an effective pixel size of 33 micron per pixel. Resolution of the images is around 270.96 micron per cycle and a signal-to-noise ratio of 62. Other system components. As explained above, the Dingo instrument can operate in two modes, a high-resolution mode and a high-flux mode, as determined by the choice of secondary collimator. Both modes were compared. A Zeiss Icon microplanar T 50mm f/2 and Zeiss Icon microplanar T f2.8 100mm lens were compared. Two scintillator screens produced by RC Tritec AG were also studied. They were made from thin aluminum sheet coated with thin layer of lithium or cadmium. A comparison between the scintillator screen thickness and achievable image resolution was made. For the Gadok screen, a comparison between 1, 2, 4, 8 and 16 seconds exposure time was made to see how this variable influences the resolution in the image plane. For the lithium scintillator screen, this comparison was made for 0.25, 0.5, 1, 2, 4, 8 and 16 seconds. The sample was kept at around 4 mm distance from the scintillator screen. For normalization, we used bright field and dark field images in according to reference 27. The high flux and high resolution modes produced very similar spatial resolutions. Considering all the results, the high flux mode produced an average spatial resolution in the image plane of 40.34 microns per cycle for an average of 2.1 seconds of exposure time. In contrast, the high-resolution mode produced image with an average resolution of 40.39 micron per cycle for an average exposure time of 4.65 seconds. On the one hand, the spatial resolution of images generated with the two lenses is not very different. MP50 produces an image with an effective pixel size of 27 micron per pixel and a spatial resolution of 40.42 micron per cycle on average, and MP100 of 40.04 micron per cycle and 9 micro per pixel effective pixel size. On the other hand, the lens affects the resolution significantly on the object plane. MP50 lens for Dingo system produces a demagnification of 6.7, while MP100 has the demagnification of 3.3. In this instance, it can be observed that the demagnification lens of 50mm has the capacity to sample a minimum resolution of 270 micron per cycle in the object plane, where a 100mm lens has the ability to sample a minimum resolution of 133 micron per cycle. Also, due to the large demagnification, a radiograph collection using the MP100 will contain more pixels per millimeters than a radiograph collected using the MP50 lens. Finally, the thickness of the scintillator screen only slightly affects the spatial resolution in the image plane. At 10% contrast, the spatial resolution of an image generated with 200 micron thick scintillator screen is around 39.66 micron per cycle, and the image generated with a 50 micron screen is 40.51 micron per cycle. The image plane resolution difference is less than 1 micron per cycle when using those two scintillator screens in this configuration. The average gray value of a radiograph generated with 8 seconds of neutron exposure is around 55,000 when high flux beam mode is used, while the radiographs have only around 18,000 gray levels when a high resolution beam mode is used. Optimization of the optical system components. The properties of the secondary detector system and the primarily neutron detector limit the spatial resolution of a neutron imaging system. Furthermore, the resolution can be influenced by the detector's width and pitch, the field of view, and the focal size. The influence of all those components will be discussed below. Overall, the Iris 15 detector, independent of the lenses used, produces image with higher resolution than the Marana's detector. In the object plane, the Marana's detector detected objects with a resolution of 888 micron when paired with the 100 MP lens. The Iris 15 detector, when paired with the MP100 lens, distinguished two objects that were 133 micron apart. But when used together with the MP50 lens, the resolution of the object plane dropped up to 271 microns. The difference can be due to the different specification of the detectors, such as pixel size. For Dingo's imaging system, when comparing the lens's performance directly, the MP100 produced slightly better resolution in the image plane, but the field of view was half, due to the fixed number of pixels of the detectors. So a small field of view will result in a higher resolution. To check the linearity of the system, we compare the high flux and high resolution modes defined by the collimator spin hole. For the imaging system of Dingo, the average resolution of images taken with the high flux beam was 40.34 micron per cycle, while for the high resolution beam it was 40.39 micron per cycle. Although the resolutions were similar, the average exposure time necessary to obtain these resolutions were 1.55 seconds, more with the higher resolution beam mode. Reference 28 noticed that when the higher resolution mode was used for their system, twice the time was necessary to produce an image with a similar resolution compared when the high flux mode was used, which is similar to our results. When using the high resolution mode, images had sharper contrast, and the saturation of the detector is highly unlikely within the detector exposure limit. The beam divergency is not a limiting factor for the two instruments' beam mode due to it being relatively small. For high resolution is 0.06 degrees, and for the high flux is only 0.03 degrees, and the small distance, 4 mm, between the scintillator screen and the phantom. The closeness of the detector to the sample and the low divergency of the beam results in the characteristic of the detector and lens being the major factor that determines the resolution. The higher signal-to-noise ratio produced by higher neutron signal can explain why high resolution and high flux beam modes can produce images with similar resolutions. There is a general assumption that the MTF is dependent on the exposure time and that prolonged exposure will produce a better signal-to-noise ratio. In our measurement, minimum changes in the image resolution were observed after 4 seconds of exposure time. Long exposure times can also lead to salt and paper noise resulting from high energy gamma and neutron strikes to the detector chips, which would degrade the image. In our images, this type of noise were more prevalent with using the GADOX or gadolinium screens than when using the lithium screens. This could be explained by numerous unstable isotopes of gadolinium. Gadolinium has around 30 isotopes. Most of them are radioactive and have half-lives of less than 25 seconds. 6 of them are naturally occurring, which upon neutron radiation produce a variety of short-lived microseconds, 2 hours of half-life, radioactive isotopes that emit gamma ray of various energies. A good example is gadolinium-155M decaying to gadolinium-155 and emitting 86.545 mK giving rays with a 31.97 milliseconds half-life. We also observed that there was a small deviation from a linear increase of the mean gray value with exposure time. This could be due to the small neutron flux fluctuations, the afterglow half-life of the scintillator screen, or the influence of the shutter open and close times. Further studies are necessary to determine if there is a significant neutron fluctuation in the dingo beamline. For the dingo instrument, we were interested in the empirical comparison between the two screens available at the beamline. The results show that the Gadok screen produces images with better resolution, while the lithium scintillator screen has a better signal-to-noise performance with an overall value of 230. With the Gadok screen, the average resolution in the image plane was 40.395 micron per cycle, but white spots were always present independent of the beam mode or exposure time, decreasing the signal-to-noise ratio to 158. With the lithium screen, the resolution was only slightly worse, 40.53 micron per cycles, and almost no white spots were visible on the image. A thicker scintillator screen decreases the spatial resolution of the image and improves the signal-to-noise ratio. The phantom method allows us to measure the influence of the scintillator screen over the MTF. For the lithium scintillator screen, the MTF difference was only 0.85 micron per cycle between a 200 micron thick screen with 39.66 micron per cycle and 50 micron thick screen with 40.51 micron per cycles. The difference between 30 and 20 micron Gadok screen was even smaller, only 0.04 micron per cycle. Conclusions. The results above show that the phantom method is a useful approach to measure the image resolution of a relatively low-resolution neutron imaging system. We were able to calculate the influence of each component on its spatial resolution achieved using the dingo imaging system. We found that the system can generate radiographs with a spatial resolution between 40 and 271 micron per cycle. From these results, we can conclude that for this system, the most significant influence of the resolution is the choice of detector. The two components of the detector that will determine the performance are the pixel size and the signal-to-noise ratio. The other imaging system components have a minimum influence on the final resolution due to the fact that the MTF does not change when these components are varied. The Iris 15 detector captures images with an overall resolution of 41 micron per cycle, while the Marana detector achieves images with 271 micron per cycle resolution. This big difference between the MTF for the two detectors shows that the difference between the pixel size is only one of the factors that affect the image resolution. Other factors, such as the contrast properties of the detector, play an important role for Dingo's system. In general, the two beam modes resulted in images with similar resolution. The only difference is in the exposure time. On average, a 2.1 second exposure in high flux mode will generate a resolution of 40.34 micron per cycle, and an exposure of 4.65 seconds will generate a resolution of 40.39 micron per cycle in high flux mode. In the cases where Gadok's scintillator screen is used, the minimum exposure time used should be between 2 and 4 seconds, and for an optimal resolution 8 seconds. When lithium screen is used, the optimal exposure time was found to be between 4 and 8 seconds. The scintillator screen thickness is not one of the major factors that influence the spatial resolution of an image.
This is the end of today's story. I hope that the past minutes helped you relax and ease you into falling asleep. If you are not 100% there yet, let us just do a breathing exercise. Count mentally with me your breath intakes and exhales. Concentrate on the counting, nothing more. Intake for 1, 2, 3, 4, and release for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In for 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.